Friends, support for Authentic South comes from listeners like you. Consider making a donation. Anything is appreciated. Just go to AuthenticSouth.com. Well, go ahead.
She came for thousands of miles, suitcase and soul full of smiles, though she made her mistakes when she was young. Time breaks the chain of the sadness she saw.
I'm Tanner Latham, and this is Authentic South. It's a storytelling podcast that explores Southern culture through food, art, music, the land, and lots of interesting characters. Today we talk with Josh Vasa, a singer-songwriter who was born in Durham, North Carolina, and later moved to Birmingham, Alabama, where he still lives. I met Josh in the downtown Birmingham offices of the Sidewalk Film Festival. His day job is handling the operations and production for the festival's year-round activities. We talked first about his family. Josh's parents immigrated to the U.S. from India in 1979.
Was there music in your family growing up?
Yes.
Did your parents play instruments, or other members of your family play instruments?
So it's neat looking back on it, because when I was a kid, I guess I never really realized how much music was an influence on our lives. But we grew up with a lot of Indian music in our household. My mom is actually a classical Indian singer, or an Indian classical singer. She sang very well. We're from southern India, and so I guess both South India and South U.S. She sang really well. She has a beautiful voice. Her family is very musically talented. Pretty much all her siblings, I think she has 5 brothers and sisters. They all sing really well. They play instruments. And yeah, so that's something I always grew up with. We grew up with a lot of Indian music in the house. You know, it's funny, I talk to a lot of musicians nowadays, and they're surprised that I don't have, I guess, the same kind of musical background that they did. I was introduced to Led Zeppelin about 5-6 years ago for the first time, and which is a faux pas. You can't do that as a musician, but I was, and I love them. But I was introduced to the Beatles about 10 years ago, so I didn't listen to them as a 3 or 4 or 5 or 6-year-old, as most musicians do, I guess, in America, and definitely, you know, in the States.
Josh has played in various bands, but he calls his current one Sannyasi. It's the nickname his grandmother gave him. She lived in India, and he didn't meet her in person until he was in high school.
And she was just a very loving, amazing woman. And so, you know, anytime I'd joke around about something, she would say, ah ha 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 ha, sannyasi. And sannyasi, in the literal term, is like essentially a monk, an ascetic, someone who leaves the world to attain spiritual enrichment. But it's used very colloquially as kind of a poking kind of word that says, you silly little guy who goes around begging for food. It's just kind of an affectionate term. And so she used that for me. And thinking through the name for this project, something that identified me, it's very difficult for anyone to think of one word or one label that identifies them in totality. Like, what's something that sums me up as a whole? And I remember I thought about it for a while as I was thinking through what would be a name that would represent this music that's coming out of me now. And what came out was, all of a sudden one day I said, aha, my mama used to call me Sannyasi.
You've got a pretty little smile that takes me a little while to believe in now. Anyhow.
When I first heard Josh sing, his voice reminded me a bit of Paul Simon's. That sound carries through the song Anyhow, one of the cuts on the band's latest album.
When the melody that hit my brain was You've Got a Pretty Little Smile. And he goes, you've got a pretty little smile. And that hit me, and I can't remember where or when exactly that happened, but I remember when it did, that caused me to wake up and make a voice memo and get on the guitar and start working through it. And the song really unfolded on itself. I'll often start a song, and man, it can take me 3 months to write it. because I can have the verse, but I sure as hell don't have the chorus, and I don't have anything to tie the two between. But this song came out immediately, and it was a love song, and I think that's what I needed to communicate through a lot of the hardship that I was going through was some love, some positivity. And
how did you build on that particular those few words and that melody? How then do you build around that?
Sure. I think it's very similar to someone who's starting the foundation of, say, a drawing, or a foundation of a house, or a foundation of anything for that matter. You start out with something that feels like it's the framework, and it's the right framework. And so that was that melody. You've got a pretty little smile. And the chord was G, and it stayed on G. And so I kept working with it. And so, and it made sense to go to, that takes me a little while to believe in now.
Anyhow, though, to me, anyhow is kind of a throwaway phrase. If you're talking to somebody, you know
right.
what I mean?
Yeah,
when you're talking to somebody and maybe they're getting what you're listening to, maybe they're not, but you finish what you have to say, and you're like, well, anyhow,
yeah.
You move on. That's how I've used that word before. Am I anywhere close to that?
No, definitely. I'm very critical of what I write. And that doesn't mean that, therefore, what I write is always amazing, but it just means that I'm very critical of it. And so I can often think that the words that initially come out are very cheesy. And so the first line of the song is, you've got a pretty little smile that takes me a little while to believe in. And so that's cheesy as hell. So I think it was a little bit of a mental stutter to say, well, anyhow, and try to move on and still try to find a way to kind of like compliment this girl that I'm trying to compliment. You know, you've got eyes that anticipate. You've got all these things that are awesome, but anyhow, I might not quite get there, but I'm working on it.
Love belongs to us. Please save me, no, don't hand me down. Anyhow, baby, please just save me, no, don't hang me around. Anyhow, hang around, anyhow.
I'd like to thank Josh Vasa and his band Sanyasi. Their album is called Suitcase and Soulful, and they're releasing it at the end of June. You heard the songs Josephine and Anyhow in the show today. For other music, go to sanyasi.bandcamp.com. We also produced a video of Josh singing an acoustic version of the song 8 Miles. To watch the video and to listen to other episodes of the podcast, click on over to AuthenticSouth.com. As always, the theme music for the show is by Chris Hope and Brett Eastep.
My name's Josh, and I just had my South authenticated.
Hey-yo!
Until we go south again, thanks for listening.